Dr. Matt Ward, Vallejo Health Clinic.
Kevin Lutz, Revamp Training Systems.
Yeah, going to chat a little bit about BFR today, blood flow restriction training, and the torture that Kevin and I came up with for himself. Just very quickly, what is BFR? It's probably one of the hottest researched things right now in rehabilitation, kind of how it plays its role in athletic and strength training. I kind of think about it from a rehab and tissue, like a tissue durability concept. So what it is it's a pretty large 4-inch cuff. Don't be fooled by the little skinny bands. It's not truly BFR. We then measure your arterial occlusion with a Doppler ultrasound, and then we work off 80% occlusion on the lower extremity, 50% on the upper, for a rep scheme of 30 reps, then 15 reps, 15 reps, 15 reps at roughly 20% of a 1 rep max lift. If it's something like you're doing a TRX row or you're doing a banded leg extension, obviously you can't quite predict a true 1 rep max, so you just kind of go hard, and as Kevin will probably attest to, you don't need a lot for quite a good response. That probably pretty fair to say?
Yeah. I mean, we work with 20% load basically, and it starts out okay feeling like any kind of other exercise, but by the time you're done that 4th set, you want nothing more to get that cuff off. There's just such an extreme metabolite buildup that burns like nothing else.
Yeah, it's wild to see, Kev, who has like a 450 plus RDL, standing there with 95 pounds on the bar and making quite a painful face.
Yeah.
It really feels good to me, actually, for somebody who can't lift like that. But basically what we use on that, 20% of a 1 rep max, or people are playing around with a little bit more or sometimes a little bit less, depending on the training age and let's say experience of somebody. And then what we look at is you're triggering a maximal response with a very sub-maximal weight. That's where it really plays in well with rehabilitation on somebody who's maybe coming back from a calf strain, coming back from a quad or hamstring injury, low back even. You can come in, it's a lot of reps, 75 reps, so you can really grease the groove on your squat or your deadlift, and you can really focus on mechanics. Maybe bracing's an issue, maybe you're doing, we're even doing like some presses right now with one of our mutual clients, and he's focusing on scapular position, but getting still a maximal training response, and you get a good systemic benefit from HGH, test, and a bunch of other kind of really good metabolites, and then increased vascularization in the area that ultimately might have been damaged for a long time if it's chronic, or you just really need to kind of like reperfuse the tissues with blood and all sorts of good stuff that gets there. So a couple questions up on the board. What did we come up with for you?
So basically we did a squat for my quads, RDL for the hamstrings. We did a bar push-up in the rack. We did a, TRX row, and then just a simple curl, and then just like skull crushers with the dumbbells.
Yeah.
The load on those were, like I said, 20%, so really, really low. But it all kind of covered all of my bases and worked on all of the kind of joints and movement patterns I was having some pain associated with. And I really felt good coming out of the session, and then for like the 1 to 2 days afterwards as well.
Yeah, and let's say kind of like going into it, what were your kind of, what were you thinking was going to happen, and how did you feel kind of after we did 2 sessions a week for 4 weeks, and just maybe touch on how long each session took, and then maybe what you feel like you achieved coming out of those sessions.
Yeah, so each session was like 20 to 25 minutes tops. I essentially did basically half of the exercises one day, half the other day. I tried to actually line them up where my previous training day worked those muscle groups, as I was looking at this as kind of a recovery methodology. And that's exactly what I found, like very little DOMs while doing this. My joints, like I said, associated with those movements would feel a lot better. Like I've had issues with my elbows like crazy, and after the curls and the extensions, my elbows felt awesome. So I was definitely feeling better from this, and it was carrying over into my regular training program. It wasn't hindering it in any way.
That's awesome.
And I was training 6 times a week, and I was able to throw these 2 sessions off with no negative impact on recovery, which was really good.
So here's somebody who's training. I should say as well, like, you know, BFR training does not replace training at 70% or higher of a 1 rep max. Like, you're not gonna pull PR deadlifts if you never practice those heavy weights. But I think it really speaks to how you can throw this into basically almost like a recovery session for an extremely experienced athlete who has been dealing with some nagging injuries and just ends up training around them a lot, or just pushing through it, which we all know about, and then coming out the other side generally feeling better.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, once you get through the pain of the actual session, like, everything moves better. Like, the one thing I noticed was with the RDLs was, like, the next day my hips felt way better than they have in a long time. It's pretty crazy to carry over.
Yeah, and what they're showing from that is that it's, even though, so say you have, let's use the shoulder for example, say you have a cuff as high as you can here. Obviously you're not cutting off any arterial flow to the shoulder itself, right? It's everything's below. But the amount of systemic response that you get, even in the area, it's going to carry over. So yes, the main training kind of area is going to be the bicep or the tricep or whatever. People are even using it for wrist and forearm rehab. But they're showing, in some research coming out right now, slap tear, bicep debridement, all sorts of stuff in the shoulder, rotator cuff repair, where they start getting the cuff around, and they're doing their very minimal exercises, and they're having a decreased time of rehabilitation and increased strength. How long do you take? Benefits? Yeah. Who do you think this is for? Who do you think this would be best used for?
From just kind of what I experienced, I definitely think return to play athletes, or anyone with an injury where they're unable to train with those heavier loads for whatever period of time. It's a great way to kind of continue to maintain that musculature while being able to get away with light loads.
Yeah.
It can be used by people that are looking for that kind of recovery benefit, like we talked about, using it as a recovery session.
Yeah.
And then I think a lot of people, potentially like the elderly, that can't get under a squat bar for whatever reason, you could easily switch this out for like a leg extension and to kind of fight off atrophy as they get older.
Yeah.
With those high loads. And I mean, you've even talked about using it with just walking on a treadmill, so it can be kind of scaled to the person.
Totally. Yeah. There's also, we probably won't talk about it today, but there's a large aerobic benefit to this as well. Even walking on a treadmill in roughly at about that 50 to 70% heart rate reserve, you're walking on a treadmill, almost barely moving, and you have quite a heart rate spike because of the cuff cutting off arterial flow. It's the same thing happens with strength training on the low loads, is that you get a triggered response because of the decreased oxygen in the distal to the limb you're using or the exercise you're doing. I think just a good point as well is that you don't need to be proficient at like RDLs and in back squats and front squats. Like, when you come in for if you're kind of post-surgical, we throw the cuff on, and then you're sitting there maybe leg out, and you're just doing quad sets, or maybe we chuck the stim on. I'm like, that's going to be your first couple of sessions. Rehab protocols post-surgical, you're looking at 5 days a week, something along the lines of what Kev did. Couple days a week for 4 weeks would be fine, depending on what you can get in here for. All sorts of different options we have. You can do sessions with me in the clinic, or you can just come in. We get you set up on your occlusion pressures, and then we get you proficient on the cuffs, and then you can come in and do your work in 20 minutes or so.
Yeah, super easy.
Absolutely, yeah. So I think the only thing that I'd add to that Kev didn't say is if you're pre-surgical, coming in, say you're going to have an ACL done, coming in, doing what we call a cell swell protocol, 5 minutes of 100% occlusion, just kind of laying there, or with some light stim on the leg. What they're showing is decreased muscle mass post. You get decreased muscle mass post surgery anyways, but now they're showing less muscle mass reduction if you've done some sort of a cell swell protocol. That's kind of still to be debated a little bit, but it's quite promising, and anything that gets you kind of back in a stronger full range of motion sooner is going to be super beneficial, super beneficial. The other one I'd maybe add too is that there's been some good success with bodybuilding and stage physique competitors coming in. You know, they all cripple themselves with volume, and you kind of still have to use roughly some sort of weight to get that response. Well, coming in here and doing some, 5-pound flies is really not going to be that hard on the joints, and you still get a great muscular response from it.
Well, and one thing I noticed from it is the carryover, like increased vascularity by like week 2.
Yeah.
And then my pumps in the gym were significantly better as well.
Yeah, right. Probably from that increased vascularity.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
totally.
Definitely like a prominent carryover to anyone looking to improve their physique for sure.
For sure.
And then, I mean, the response from growth hormone and test increases, like it may play a small role in getting leaner or bigger or whatever, but I mean, it can't hurt, that's for sure.
Totally.
But yeah, definitely benefits for that population as well.
Yeah, I think just even adding, if you add 2 training days in, with the BFR system, but you're not, taxing the joints and having that kind of joint pain, I think it can only be beneficial.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, nice, man. Well, I want to thank you for even taking the time to hang out, and definitely thanks for coming in, using the cuffs, and kind of putting your 2 cents to it. We'll maybe put links up to where people can find you and where people can find me in the clinic if you want to set something up, programming-wise with you, nutrition-wise with you, or coming in to see me for aches, pains, injury, performance, whatever it might be.
Yeah.
Yeah, man.
Yeah, thanks for letting me try it out for 4 weeks and go through some torture and learn something.
We'll say there is going to be DOMs for almost anyone after the first couple of sessions.
Yeah.
Let's just get that out the open right now. Cool. Well, thanks so much, buddy.
Thank you.
For sure. And we'll chat with you guys soon. DM us with any questions.